In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, in over 11 years of priesthood, I've worked with many broken people, many people who've come to the church who've been disfigured in some way by a traumatic event that's happened in their life. Something that kicked off a series of responses that ultimately traumatized them. Always an event, usually relating to violence or something that is deeply out of a person's control, producing all kinds of fears and insecurities, anguish. People begin to ask questions about themselves. Am I a coward? How did I let this happen? What does this say about me that I'm the type of person that this happened to? And then you end up with the memory. You end up with the memory of the event, and that memory just starts to turn itself into your mind. It becomes like a labyrinth. You can't talk or think or find your way out of it. It's kind of all pervasive. It's like that dark whispering that comes to you at the night when you try to lay down and go to bed, or the night terrors that happen when you're asleep, or even during the day when you begin to drift off and think when you're driving, and all of these thoughts come flooding back into your mind. All these memories start to plague you like an illness, like a disease, but the disease is in your mind, and it's ever present and pervasive. I had a particularly difficult case of a young man in his 20s. He came to the church with a lot of trauma. He'd grown up in a very dysfunctional home and began smoking weed and drinking from the age of 14 all the way through high school and getting into all kinds of trouble. And as his life began to spin more out of control into his senior year, his parents decided to have him taken away to a military boys' home in Mississippi. The school was called Bethel Baptist Boys' Home. It's actually well documented on the internet now. But at the time, there was no documentation. There were no Google reviews. There was nothing like that. So he was taken away to this place where they physically and mentally abused him. And he saw great evils happen both to himself and to the other people around him. He was kind of a wild but kind of carefree type of person. But when he came back, he had that 1,000-yard stare in his eye. He said that he couldn't have people get close or touch his face. He had an extreme sense of fight or flight, so that if someone came at him, his immediate response was to respond kind of in a life or death manner with anger and potentially violence. Became a victim of night terrors, vivid, all-encompassing dreams that would put him back there or put him somewhere else, and would wreck his whole day waking up from one of those. And so in his mid-20s, he came to the church and had basically a realization that he was still drinking, but the drinking was taking him to dark places in his mind. His thoughts were just so out there that with the encouragement of the priest, he ended up putting down the alcohol, and that's when his life really got worse, because the alcohol had worked as a method of sedating all the pain and the anger and all the memories and everything else that he was trying to drown and keep locked within himself. He was unhinged. And I know all this because this is actually my story. I was the young man who ended up at this Bethel Baptist Boys' Home. I was the young man who went through these great evils. I suffered this physical abuse and mental abuse there at the hands of evil men. And I came back deeply damaged. You know, my outlook on life was totally warped by that event. And I was full of so much anger and hatred. I had that rage that was inside of me. It was like a fire that was consuming my existence from the inside out. And I thought by going to the church, I would find the healing that I was looking for. I thought that this was kind of a last-ditch effort of like, maybe there's something in the church that can help pull me back from the brink of self-destruction, because I felt like I was exploding and being decimated from the inside out. I was walking around all the time, like 1 foot in this life and 1 foot in the boys' home at all times. and I didn't know what to do about it. And like I said, once the priest encouraged me to stop drinking, that's when my life got worse. Because now all the pain and the trauma and the anger was no longer buried beneath those feelings. It was always right on the surface. And life became borderline unbearable at that point. In fact, what ended up happening was I ended up diving very deeply into prayer because I couldn't handle just everyday existence. Like life just seemed to be more than I could cope with. And so it is, through this process, I ended up meeting my spiritual mother. I ended up opening up to her about all this pain and this trauma and the things that had happened to me. And she gave me what at the time was unthinkable, but the best advice I ever received, which was, she said, you have to learn how to forget all that happened to you. You have to learn how to live with a blank slate. See, I was living life in this all the time, with the anger, with the pain, with the rage always bubbling inside of me. And she wanted me to erase the whole narrative as if it ever happened. And it felt like a scam. You know, I felt like I was doing a disservice to the people who had been there with me. I felt like I was being untrue to say that it didn't happen. And she wasn't saying that at all. She was simply just saying, you can't live in the present when you're living in the past. When those memories are constantly bleeding into your life right now, and you're pissed off all of the time, and you're full of rage, that anger, that fire starts to eat up all of your present life, and you can't even exist in a meaningful way. And so it was like, with just the help of prayer, of forgetting the memories, of putting them behind me, of trying to stay in the present, of focusing on the life that I wanted to have instead of the life that had happened to me, I began to live a whole new existence. But all of that hinged around one thing. I couldn't let go of the past until I let go of the people. And the only way for me to let go of the people was to forgive them. See, they were the trigger. They were what was sparking everything off. My inner hostility towards them, the fact that I was walking around with my mind on those people, they were constantly feeding into it, and I had to switch the narrative. Number one was I had to see the fact that I needed to have compassion on them. These were disfigured people themselves. I mean, who abuses children, but somebody who is deeply, deeply, deeply disfigured themselves. And I could see that they were hurt and broken in their own ways, probably from their own families, with their own trauma, with their own abuse, and they abused others. But I didn't want to be linked to them anymore. I didn't want to be chained down to them. I didn't want to hold on to them, and I didn't want them holding on to me. And so I became absolutely diligent in this pursuit of forgiveness, because I wanted to let all of this go so that I could live my life in the present and I could have the things that I was hoping for. You know, I wanted to have a family. I wanted to have children. I didn't want to raise them as somebody who could not function in life. And I sure did not want to hand on to my kids all of the trauma that had been handed on to me. And I knew, and I could see it as clear as day. It's like traumatized people traumatize their children. And I didn't want to be traumatized anymore. And so those were the two things I focused on: forgiveness and forgetfulness. I wasn't defined by what happened to me. I didn't choose for it to happen. I wasn't a victim because I wasn't going to let it define me. It wasn't going to overshadow my whole life. It wasn't going to be the thing that was my story. That wasn't my story. My story happened when I forgave and let those things go and let those people go out of my soul. That's when my story began. When my story began, it was my life with my wife having children, a family, and then later on, or part of that, the priestly ministry and all the people that I wanted to help and have helped in my life. That is what defines me as my story. Those things that have happened to me, they have shaped me. But by the grace and miracle of God, they have shaped me into a better man. Because I don't want to be the man that those things intended for me to be. And so it is the greatest gift that you can give yourself, the absolutely best thing that you can do with your life is forgive people. And let that trauma go. Erase that part of your story and start your life fresh and new. May God bless you.